Welcome to the Possibility Action Network podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton, aka Possibility Man. We're committed to bringing you guests who strive to better people's lives and serve as a force for good in the world. Today, our guest is Helen Neal-Ali. She began her public speaking career addressing women's issues in 1991. After learning and understanding that changed her life in 1993, she established life-changing consulting and associates. She earned certification as a trauma specialist from Florida State University. She has been a transformational coach and trainer for over 25 years. She travels all over the United States and abroad to show people how to change their limiting beliefs of thoughts shaped by their traumatic past. Helen is the author of Okay Forever, a book of hope. Helen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Wonderful. Look, I've said a little bit about your background, but my audience will want to know, tell me about growing up. Where did you grow up? Where are you from?
Okay, I grew up in Tampa, Florida, and I still live here. I've been here all my life. And I grew up in what you could call a weekend domestic violent home. It wasn't a happy home on the weekend. It was great during the week. But my dad was what you call the weekend alcoholic. He would work real hard, very hard, middle class. I mean, we had everything. My parents were very heavy, hardworking people. But I grew up with that, but not realizing that it was doing anything to me. I was always an A student. I went to Tampa Bay Technical High School where I didn't want to go to college at first. So I wanted a degree. So I got a degree in business. I've always wanted to be my own business person. I'm an entrepreneur from birth. My first entrepreneur job was at 6 years old. My grandmother sold frozen cups and cookies, out of the housing project that she lived in. So I asked my parents to get me there, and I started at an early age being an entrepreneur, doing my own little business. But growing on up, I mostly in Tampa, that's been my whole thing that I've done. I've done nursing for 16 years. That's where I think I got to learn people, love people of all races, nationalities, and creed. That was my first thing. And then later on, we'll get into how I started doing what I'm doing. But I think it all stemmed from a child with dealing with trauma and also growing up with nursing and getting the care and love for people. So I have a heart and want to help as many people as I can.
I see. Now, you mentioned that your father was a weekend alcoholic, and I identify with that because my father, hardworking, good man, but he was also a weekend alcoholic. So let me ask you right out of the gate, do you think that living in the house with a weekend alcoholic causes any trauma for children and other people who may be living in the house?
Yes, it does. And what had happened was my dad would come home on Friday. He worked Monday through Thursday was perfect. I mean, good. But Friday was payday. And when he get that, back then I'm 64. So, they didn't go to the banks, ain't no bank getting their money and doing anything with it. So he go to the liquor store. But he come home, and to get out, he bring his money home, very good provider, but he would start domestic violence. He started fighting, as he called it, with my mom so that he could get out and hang out for the whole weekend. So as a child, I knew that wasn't right, but now that I know what trauma is, I saw myself getting in some of those same relationships with drinking, and I got partners that were on drugs or drinking and got into domestic violence. So it does affect children because you start thinking this is normal. This is a normal way of life because that's all you know. So it does harm children when they see alcoholic or domestic violence or anything going up in their lives.
I see. So clearly you're a smart person. You must have been a smart student in high school. As you were approaching graduation, what were your hopes and dreams for yourself?
To own my own business, I didn't know how. I wasn't sure what. But I ended up working in a hospital as a mission clerk, and that's why I got to love people. So I ended up getting that job because I came out with a certification in business education. So I did that, but I loved when I admitted my patients. I would always, especially if they were having surgery, I'd go and check on them And then I got the love of nursing. I wanted to care for people. I realized that I had a heart for people. So right out of high school, this is by the time I'm 19, I'm a nurse's aide. I dropped the business thing and went into nursing aid for the preceding 16 years that I did that.
I see. Okay, now you are a transformational coach, is how I'm going to put it, and you have training as a, you're a trauma specialist. You have your consulting company. You've had it since 1993. You're the author of a book. You do workshops all over. Everyone would say, "Wow, she has had an easy life." So let me ask you, as a transformational coach, when you talk to people, do you actually have an experience of having faced life challenges yourself?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Many, many life challenges. And I think that's what makes me a good coach. Because when people are going through it, and I'm a Christian, I'm just gonna say that right out back, because I was fussing at God, like, wait a minute, you don't gave me enough, experiences to share with people. I don't need any more. But as I've been doing as I grew up, I ended up getting into relationships that were unhealthy, just like my mom and dad with domestic violence and that. So I've been homeless. I have two kids that I birthed, and one that I adopted, a daughter that I adopted. I've been homeless. I ended up with mental illness based on being in an emotional relationship that was not more verbally and mental abusive than anything else. I ended up in the mental health ward at Memorial Hospital. And later on in years, I've had children went to prison, a couple of them, my grandson and my son. It's been so many trials, but an understanding that I learned in 1996 helped me to go through those things a lot better. So I don't go to people thinking that I'm perfect and everything is going to be okay. Or even if you learn this understanding that I'm teaching you that life is going to be okay, that's not true. It's reality. Reality hits us all. So I've had a lot of things, even as a trauma coach, I go through things, and I want people to know that, but I go through them with peace now, instead of the trauma that it put on me before, the mental anguish, I guess I could say, that it did before. Yeah. I understand now that if it's something I can't do anything about, I don't have to give it as much energy as I used to. I don't have to think about it and play with it as much for it to take me out. I'm in control of it now. It's not in control of me no more. That's kind of how I coach. But I'm very open with people, and I think that gives them hope. That's why my book is called Okay Forever, Book of Hope. When they see that I went through something and I'm still able to function healthy and mentally healthy, it gives them encouragement to do the same.
Okay, we're going to dig deeper into your transformation in a moment, but I want to go back. You mentioned having a business before you arrived at this understanding. So, because it's in your book, I don't want to give it away because I do want people to find your book. But I think you own a daycare center for adults, which was, tell us about that, and then tell us about having lost it all.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I had an ACLF. It wasn't a daycare. It was a home. They lived in my home. I had a 4-bedroom house with a 2-bedroom apartment in the back. And like I told you, I had a 16-year of nursing. The last 6 years was this home that you're talking about. It was an ACLF for elderly people. And what happened was I ended up getting into a relationship. I love dealing with them and taking care of them. I ended up breaking my hip. That's how I ended up getting into the ACLF. I was working as a home health nurse, and I ended up breaking my hip. And when I broke my hip, I got a baby now. I got 2 sons by this time, and I needed some kind of business. I had one son. I take that back. I had one son, and I needed somewhere to still take care of my son. Even after I broke my hip. So a lady said, "You're so good. You got this big old house. Why don't you just do an ACLF?" And I did. And I took care of. I had like 7 patients that I took care of. Loved them. Enjoyed them. I made them feel at home. I treat them like I would treat my father, because they were all men. Took real good care of them. And then I met a guy, thought I fell in love. I fell in lust. You know how we do. We don't always get love, but I fell in lust and met him. And then I got pregnant with my son, a son for him. This is where my second son came along. And then we got married because of being a Christian Sunday school teacher. Sunday school teachers got to get married. I got married. And then all of a sudden, right after we got married, he just said, this got to go, these people got to go. I'm like, what people? These, these people are home, they've been home for what, 6 years. I can't just throw them out, but I lost everything. He ended up being very controlling after we got married, not before. And he made me get rid of my people. So I got rid of them. And then he ended up getting physically and mentally and physically abusive. And then I ended up homeless with my 2 kids, ended up in the battered women's shelter, getting away from him. And that's how I lost it all. I lost that boarding home.
Okay. But you wanted to, obviously, and this is my way of expressing it, clearly you wanted to be a person of service because you were serving those people in that home. But in 1991, if I got the chronology right, you began speaking about women's issues, about domestic violence. And what prompted you to do that? Because you had not encountered this understanding yet.
No, I hadn't encountered the understanding yet. But what happened was when I ended up leaving him and getting out of that relationship, I ended up in a housing authority. Matter of fact, let me back up a little bit. I ended up in a battered women's shelter, a domestic violence battered women's shelter. And when I came out of the battered women's shelter, they were saying, Helen, you need to tell your story. So I started speaking. This is where I started speaking to people about domestic violence. The director came to me and said, we need funding, right? It was for funding for them. And I want to help other women. So I started speaking with United Way campaigns. And one day I was speaking at USF, and that's when I was speaking about domestic violence. So that's how I got into the point of speaking and want to give back, was when I ended up homeless. I went in housing authority. I ended up on welfare, lost my home, lost everything, ended up on welfare, with my 2 kids. I mean, just lost it all. So that's kind of how I ended up getting into wanting to help and give back. And then I wanted to go back to that shelter and help out.
Okay, and we're just thinking about, that experience and what comes next. And because I really want people to get this transformation, because when I read about it in your book and when I heard you talk about it, it was so impactful on me. So the first thing, it seems to me though, that your life is an illustration of people being guided, even if you don't know that you are being guided. So something from what I want you to tell the story, but something significant happened in your life in 1993 when you went to a workshop. I think it was called Health Realization. Can you tell us about that? And I want to dig into that because, Helen, I'm telling you, you left that workshop on fire. I still don't understand how you did it. So I want to really dig into that. So please tell us.
It really was 1996 when I went to the workshop, but all of the domestic violence and all this other stuff and being homeless and all that was 91, and it kind of ended up. And I from 91 to 95 was when I was speaking on domestic violence.
I see.
And then I went to, was speaking at USF. This is when I was introduced in 1995. I was speaking at USF for October Domestic Violence Month. I was a survivor, and I was on a panel. And a lady came up to me who was the deputy director of Bayer Legal Services, our legal service here in Tampa. And she said, you kept saying stinking thinking. Because I kept saying, I keep making these bad decisions with men, and I don't know why. And then I know now why, but I didn't know why, and why I was making these choices, because I just trusted people, and I just felt if somebody came into my life, they're going to be nice like I'm nice. I just assumed that. But anyway, she said, well, I would like for you to go to this workshop called Health Realization. Now I'm on welfare. Got 2 kids, and now then adopted a 3rd one. Now I have my daughter that I got from the battered women's shelter. Her mother and I were roommates, and I ended up getting her. So now I have 3 kids, and here this lady's asking me, and I'm getting like $300 a month welfare. I'm on food stamps. I'm living in housing, and she wants me to go to some workshop. But like most people, you want to be a people pleaser. So I was like, okay, yeah, how much it costs? Like I got money. I had no money, Steve, at all. So she said, it's $350. I was like, oh no, honey, I can't afford. She said, oh no, we're going to pay for you. And they paid for me to go to this thing. So now I feel obligated to go to this class. But mind you, I was already taking Xanax and Topanel and seeing my psychiatrist and going to group therapy because I had 2 nervous breakdowns prior to this. We didn't get into that, but you have to get the book, y'all, to read that part to get into that part. But anyway, I went. And when I went to that workshop, when I first walked in, I thought it was the wrong workshop because everybody was white. There was no black people in there, but one lady, other than myself. And she was working with them, a little assistant. So, but they were happy people. You know, here I was miserable and, you know, feeling like my life just had been, you know, just crazed and all these other thoughts were going in my head. And when the lady came over to me, Elsie Spittle, who's a dear, dear friend now, and she was like, and she's from Canada. So she goes, "Dearie, you know, I'm so glad you're here." And she was just so happy. But one thing she said in that workshop that day, she told us all, she was saying that we all have inside of us wisdom and common sense to be good people. She said, and we have choices of what thoughts we want to entertain. We don't have to entertain every thought that comes into our life. And I was like, yeah, right. So when she said everybody, I thought about that ex-husband that I had just left, you know, and I was like, he ain't got no common sense. The way he treated me, and you know, I'm just going on. So she told us that day to think about somebody that you dislike. I have, well, he was the one. He was on my mind. I didn't say it out loud, but I was thinking it. And she said, think about that person. And I said, he a no good, da 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 da, you know, in my head, and I'm angry, you know. And she gave us this thought wheel, and it was a thought gives you a feeling, you get a behavior and a result. I said, well, my thought is he's a no good, da 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 da, and my feelings is I'm angry. My behavior is I'm having these panic attacks, and the result is I'm taking Xanax, Topinel, and seeing a psychiatrist. And I was like, wait a minute. And then I got mad now because now I'm mad at him again. So I'm riding around this negative wheel. So then she said, think about something positive about that person. It had to be something you liked about him. Well, he was a good father. He had a daughter that was, you know, when I met him, that was 11 years old. He was so good to her. Well, I didn't have that. My dad didn't spend time with me on the weekend. You know, he was out drinking. Monday through Friday, he was working. I didn't have that bond. So when I saw him, I saw a father figure. And I wanted him to treat me like that. So that was the turning point. I went back around that wheel and I was like, you know what? He's a good father. You know, I need to be, you know, happy about that. You know, he paid good child support. I mean, this man, he's all right. So the behavior was we may not be husband and wife, but we could be the best parents. And the result is that we can get along for our son. And that was it. It was like my whole life just flashed before me. And I started going back through a list. I can't go through all of it on this little podcast right now, but I started going through and I started seeing the innocence in other people. I started seeing that just like I had trauma, he had trauma. I remembered his dad being abusive to his mom. So it just made sense. Everything is like, everything just clicked. And I saw everybody and every hurt that I had prior to this was only that everybody was doing the best they could with what they knew at that time. And it was like a ton of bricks just fell off my shoulders. And within 4 days, the fifth day, I was working with the lady. I was working with her in a housing project. I started volunteering, working with teenage moms here at Riverview Terrace housing project. She said, we don't have any money to pay you. I said, I don't want money. People need to hear this. They're thinking off. And let me tell you a little part that I don't know if you read it in the book, but I had 2 nervous breakdowns, was on the verge of a third one right before this workshop. And I had told my psychiatrist, I went to the psychiatrist on a Tuesday, and Thursday was the workshop. And she said, well, I'm gonna put you in the hospital. She could not find a bed anywhere that she was on staff. So I couldn't go until Monday. Now the workshop is Thursday through Sunday. So now I went to the workshop. Monday, I went in her office to tell her that I didn't need to go to the hospital because it was my thinking was off. And I was just going and I was hyper, and she was like, oh my God, she thought I was panicked now, you know, panic. And she said, well, I'm gonna, she was starting to doubt. I took off. I have not seen that lady since. I have not taken medication since. I was like, it was like a transformation. I just knew that I could take control of my thoughts and take which ones I entertain. I can't, you know, thoughts come and go. You can't control what comes up in your head. But I knew which one I wanted to entertain. And my life changed. And then Elsie hired me as a volunteer to work in that housing project. And 6 months later, I started a life-changing consultant and associates. And here I am, 25, 26 years later.
Well, your transformation was profound.
Yeah.
How do you explain that? I mean, because it's as if a tree got shaken, and you got shaken. How do you
Yeah.
explain that? How do you explain
Well,
that?
I'm a Christian, and TD Jakes was in town that same week from Thursday to Sunday night with Woman Thou Loose. So in the morning from 9 to 4, I was going to this workshop. Same day, same. This was a God setup. I just said God just set it up, where He freed me secularly about how I think. So that's go to the science part of it. And then at night, I was seeing TD Jakes, and the spiritual part was setting me free. So by that time, I was getting a double hit each night up until that Sunday. And by Monday, I thought if I was a plane, somebody could have flew me. They could have flew me. I was just on high. I was on such a spiritual high from both the scientific way that I think and process information, and the spiritual way that I process. So I think that was what really did a big transformation for me, because I already knew about God and had a relationship with Him, but it even made that bigger. And then it just made me open up to hear stuff that I hadn't heard from before, that this was a calling on my life. It wasn't just me transforming. It was transforming me to put me into my purpose. And I saw that. I just saw that by that Sunday.
I feel that I hear you when I read you. So I want to go back. You mentioned Elsie Spittle, a woman out of Canada.
Yeah.
And I know that, she was sharing what she learned from her teacher, whose name was Sydney Banks. So tell us about Sydney Banks, and did you meet him? I know he's still, that he's not deceased. What did you tell us about that? What is that?
Okay. Well, I met Elsie. Elsie first was the first one that I met. And then right after I met her, I think it was maybe I went to the class in March. And in June of that same year, 1996, she told me that there was a conference going to be in Canada. And so I went to Canada with her. She took me and another lady, about 4 of us. I think it was like 4 of us. We went to Canada. Our first time going international, going somewhere. And here I am in the projects going to Canada. Can you imagine that? So anyway, so I go to Canada. And it was another gentleman that he's deceased now, that paid for our funding to go over there. And I met Sid. I got to know Sid, and I'm so honored to say that he was such a humble man. I mean, told it like it was. He talked about thought. He was real soft-spoken, a Scottish man. But the thing that I was so honored about, because of me knowing Elsie, learning from Elsie, I was able to meet all of the frontline people that Sid Banks knew Sid Banks from the beginning, before the United States came over, before Roger Mills and those came over. I got to meet Sid and his wife. I got to meet Elsie and her husband. I got to meet Chip and Jan Chipman. I got to meet Jane and Tom Tucker. I got to meet the Cancels. So these are all big people. They're the kind of first hysterians, I guess you would. So I became their little baby sister. So I kind of became a part of it. So I could call Sid at home. Sid would call me at home. I talked to him and Judy. He was just a down-home man that God gave an insight, and he was not selfish, and he shared it. I love it that I learned from that way. And then he was the one that saw that I had an epiphany. Because he made me right away. I mean, I was only there 6 months, and I was already teaching at the foundations and stuff because of Sid. Because Sid said she got it. He said even my friends said, one of my girlfriends said, "Oh my God, you changed. What happened to you? You just glowing. It's a light about you." And he saw it. And so he was it was a great experience. It was a great experience knowing all of them. And we're still in contact with each other,
That's great.
Those that are still living. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. That's great. So I want to go to, you have this epiphany, this insight that rattled your cage. And soon after that, you established life-changing life-changing consulting.
Right, life-changing consulting.
Tell us about that. I mean, what?
Well, before LC was about right after I learned that in what March, and then I was real close to LC and kind of she was my mentor, and I was going in the housing projects with her, and then she was going to be leaving and going to California to work with Roger Mills. And so I said, well, I still want to do this. I got to help people. And she was the one that was instrumental in saying, well, let's start your own little company. And she helped me set it up, life changing. So by September 1996, I had started my business I learned it in March and started my company in September. But being that entrepreneur, business-minded woman, I knew I could do it. And then right after I did that, a well-known man here who funded a lot of health realization stuff, he had learned that I was doing this. And I had started working at a couple of organizations here locally as a contractor, with my life-changing consultant, teaching people the principles. Like I worked for DACO, which was a drug rehab. I started working for them, and I was going to Alpha House working with teenage moms. And that's he came in, he said, what are you doing? I heard that you just learned this in March. I said, no, it's not a learn. It's what people got. They just got to know it's inside of them. Nobody tells us how we think. Nobody tells us that we have the power to not do this stupid thing over here. I know it's wrong, but I'm gonna do it anyway. I don't have to do that. Nobody ever tells us that we have a choice. We just kind of go with what we think. So he came to me, and then he was blown away. And by then he went to finding contracts and where do you want to go? I went to tell him places I wanted to go. So he started sponsoring me. And then he was like, well, do you want to make money with this? How much money you want? I said, I never did this before. I don't know how much it costs. And he said, well, I'll pay you $50 an hour everywhere you go, plus travel. So that's how I got started.
Wow.
Okay.
So, two questions, because people will want to know, and I want to know. So, and make it dummy it down for me. Okay. What is this understanding? That's the first thing. And secondly, what did you teach when you went out there?
Okay. Well, it's three principles that are based off of this understanding. It's mind, thought, and consciousness. And mind, you say, is a spiritual creation, a creator of everything. And no matter what religion you are, you could call it whatever you want. People call it different things. I call it God because I'm a Christian, or the Holy Spirit. And that's what I really saw. I saw a little bit deeper than just being God. I saw the Holy Spirit guiding me. So that's how I took it. I was like, oh, this wisdom, because they say this wisdom that's greater than anything. So different religions, and this is like true for everybody. And then there was the consciousness, just our awareness of where we are, what we're going into. So I look at relationships and stuff now. Before I would just jump in them. Now I'm like, okay, I got to be conscious of this. I got to watch this person, see what's going on. So I teach people that it's just your awareness. And then thought is the third one. And thought, it could be done different ways. It's our learned thoughts. That's come from our experiences and things that we've been through. It's thoughts that just pop in our head, which we call insights, especially if they're good, if they're positive. There's some good insights that pop in. We got to notice those. And also thoughts that we kind of create with our ego. Sometimes we can make things thinking because we want it to go that way. So I just kind of teach people those three principles and then let them know they have a choice in that. But the thing that really did it for me was that thought wheel. That a thought gives you a feeling, you get a behavior, and you get a result. Well, what I used to do was just have a thought and go straight to the behavior. I mean, I had the feelings because those two are connected. If you have a negative thought, you're going to have a negative feeling. The power that it gave me on that thought wheel is that I don't have to have a behavior just because I'm having a negative feeling. I have power in that thought part. So I can have a negative thought and the feeling gonna come, they're connected. Happy thought, happy feeling. Those things are connected. You never can separate those. But what I can do is what I do with it. Now it's on me. It's my responsibility. If I go ahead and do something negative, I already know I got the consequence coming. The result gonna be negative. And then I also know that if I'm having a negative thought, if I calm myself down, this is what I teach people. If you just think about that wheel, if I do this, what happens? So I teach people how to do that before they go into the action mode. Follow it through because you know what the consequence is going to be. And then usually, in our human, endeavor, we always say, oh, that ain't gonna happen to me. And then when it happened to us, we say, some told me that was gonna happen. We already know. So, but and that was the epiphany for me. So now, no matter what decision I make, no matter what's coming, if it's business, if it's relationship, it's my kids, I take that moment just to think in my head and play it out both ways, what would happen. Then now I have a choice that I want that happy on, because I choose peace now. I want peace in my life, Stephen. I don't want no more chaos. Wow. I had enough of that. I had 38 years of that, 38 years of chaos. I don't want it. I've had chaotic things happen, but they haven't taken me out. Yes. So that's kind of how I teach people.
Okay. So some people will want to know, because you are, let's call it an assertion. You are asserting that people can change,
yes.
And I'm agreeing with
you. By choice.
Yeah, it's an invitation. Each person has to decide if they want it or not. But you're saying that your position is, your stance is, yes, people can change. Let me ask you this, Helen. What kind of changes have you seen in people from their encountering this understanding?
Oh, so many. I got so many stories. Some I put in my book, a couple of them, but one that just happened really, really recently, that I have to share her story. It's a young lady that I had worked with for 2 years, and she's been diagnosed with PTSD. Did I say it right? I usually kind of mess it up. So she came to my workshop. First, I worked with her in housing authority over in Sarasota, and I had worked with her for a year in person. And then really almost 2 years in person. And then when we went Zoom, when the COVID hit and I went into Zoom, I still was talking to her every week. I mean, her 3 hours went into almost 2 years of counseling, just talking one-on-one. And she would never hear what I was saying. This is where this epiphany came in. So I did my first train the trainer, because I was like, I can't do this by myself. I need to train some people. Right. So she said, well, I would like to go to your trainer class. I said, okay, good. So it was an 8-week program. So by the 6th week, when we did it by Zoom, the other people that I was working with, I knew that they wanted to work with people, but she was just in there. But she was smiling. I mean, she was happy. I had never in 2 years seen her happy. She was always, for her, the PTSD, she just can't handle this, can't handle that. And she was smiling. So I was going to Sarasota the next day. So I called her when I got off. I said, you were really smiling, like something's different. Something's happened to you. I said, I don't know what it is, but you're different. I said, can I meet you for lunch tomorrow? She said, yeah. And so we met up for lunch. So I said, what happened? And she just came in like a whole, I guess like people saw me. She was just glowing. And I said, what? She said, oh, I just went on a trip. She said, I just came back from a 9-day trip to New York. I say, you drove? She said, yeah, this lady could not drive from Sarasota to Bradenton, which is a 30-minute ride, a less than 30-minute ride. And here she's on a 9-day trip. So she said, I went on this trip with this lady to go get her furniture from New York and bring it back here. So I said, well, what have she said? She said, I just woke up one day and I just realized, wait a minute, and then she said, she was waiting for the PTSD to come. It never came. So say on the trip, the lady was so depressed that she went to teaching the lady what I was teaching her. So by the time these 2 ladies come back, they both changed. She don't went on a 9-day trip with this lady. And you know what? And I got to call to see if she's okay, because this lady used to call me almost every day. I haven't heard from her in a month now. She's doing wonderful. So I watched people just lives change. Another lady on drugs, I met her, and was her husband had died, and she ended up getting a relationship with somebody that was on crack cocaine. She got hooked to crack cocaine. She came to one of my workshops, or it was a really a support kind of group I had going in a church many years ago. And she came to that and she changed. She went back to USF, got her counseling degree, and then she started working with people that were on drugs. I've seen so many people just wake up, because when they realize the power that we have inside mentally to change our lives, I mean, it's such a gift. It's like, ta-da, Superwoman. I used to be waiting for my hero to come, And then I realized I was my own shero. I didn't need no hero. Okay. So so that's kind of how I teach people. And I have fun with it. It's don't even seem like I'm doing work, Stephen, because when it's so rewarding to see people just pop,
Yes.
when they find the true them, that we're spiritual beings. And I think that's what people forget. We always living in the flesh and what's happened to us on the outside, but they don't realize inside there's a spiritual being that needs to be fed and will take us through whatever's happening on the outside.
Okay. So so who could benefit from this understanding, especially in your work? Who is this for? Is this for only for people who was once like a drug addict or alcoholic, or who is this for?
Anybody, a human being, anybody with breath in their body. I've worked with people from losing babies, grieving over that, from just childhood trauma, just feeling unloved. I've worked with people, not just drugs and that. I've worked with people with all walks of life. I've been working recently. I just started doing some work with some seniors, and I'll tell this lady's story. And she's in her 70s, maybe pushing 80s, and she's been hating her dad for a long, long time. And her dad's dead and gone, and here she is still holding on to something. And it's traumatic for her. It was really traumatic. I started doing a support group over there. And then one day she walked in, she said, I forgave my dad. And I was like, you did? I mean, it was just like, and it was her. It was nothing I did. I just told her that concept of when we're having these negative feelings, what thought is coming from her? And her thought was her dad was whatever she had going on. And she realized he's not that now. It's living in the now. When people realize that when we live in the past, that's where most of this hurt comes from. But if we live in it, if that's not happening now, it's just a thought. It takes the power out of it. And she just, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know of some examples and people around me where, nephews and their aunts don't talk because of something that happened some years ago, or sisters may not talk because of something that happened. So this certainly is going on, and people, I think, if you have that in you, you got to hurt, you got to feel something. You can't carry that. So I know someone. She's a licensed counselor. I'm not going to use her name. And she works with college students all over the country. And she's saying that she gets a lot of calls from young people. These kids are in college, in college. They go to the cafeteria to eat meals. They don't even have to cook their meals. And she said that they're reporting that they want to kill themselves. And so clearly, people, even if you don't know it, some people are hurting.
Yeah.
And you're saying there's an answer. There's an answer if you want it.
Yes.
Is that about right?
Yes, you're right. And even from little kids, I work from kids all the way up to a college. I've done with college students. I've worked with a couple of colleges and just went in and talked with their children. West Virginia University, I used to go to their history program every year, and I'd be there a week working with their students. I go through a week of working with them on using the same principles. Fort Valley State University, I went there and worked with their students. And that, when you mentioned suicide, that brought that up, because at the time that they asked me to come in there was a big suicide rate there at Fort Valley State University. And I went and worked with their students. So everybody's hurting. Everybody has their trauma or their things going on. So this is for any and everybody, from kids all the way up to seniors.
Right. And from the working class to the professional. No one is exempted from life.
No.
In fact, the president of the United States can benefit from talking with someone who has had a huge impact. So I'm a former college professor, and at my last university, I was in some of these big universities, primarily white institution. Few African Americans, Black Americans, a few people from other cultures. And I would tell my colleagues, look, we need a way to talk about this. We needed a way to engage this difficult subject of they're responsible for my pain, or you're responsible for your situation. And they thought that it was crazy. But from what you're talking about, though, there is a way to engage controversial subjects, no matter what they are.
Right.
If people are open to it. You said about
Exactly.
that?
Yeah, you're right. And then what I've really learned how to do is talk about forgiveness. That's one way that I do it. Forgiveness is not for the other person, it's for you. And when people realize that forgiveness is a personal benefit, a personal honor, a badge of honor, that's when we do, because so many people think forgiveness is weakness. And they look at it that way. If I say I'm sorry, I forgive somebody, I'm weak. That's not true. Opposite is you're strong because you're making yourself strong. And then another thing that what I had a problem with back in the day is that I used to want to, and what made me so upset with people that hurt me or whatever, I was waiting for them to say they were sorry before I forgave them. And then with this understanding, I realized that's not necessary. An apology is not necessary because the person, sometimes people hurt us, don't even know they hurt us. Because what do? A lot of times we don't even say that we're hurt. The person don't know we hurt, and they keep hurting us because we're not even saying you hurt us, but we taking it, we're holding it inside. And that's where that forgiveness is a big key. Yeah.
That's great. Maybe we can find psychologists that allow us to offer services to help them get into the program.
Yeah.
Now, I know that you're working with a group that's called, in fact, you were the founding members of this group called Sarasota Strong.
Yes.
I am so impressed by just the thinking to establish this group organization for the benefit of Sarasota. So first, why did you all establish Sarasota Strong? And then secondly, what does it do?
Okay. Well, the Sarasota Strong was started from the Center of Religious Tolerance. Her name is Andy Blanche. Andy Blanche is our visionary, I guess, of how this all got started. And I was just working for the Sarasota Center for Religious Tolerance with Andy Blanche, who is the executive director. And one of her board members saw me speaking here in Clearwater, not too far from here. And she at a women conference, and she said, "You're doing trauma healing." I didn't know anything about trauma 5 years ago. I knew what trauma was, but not knowing that it was related to our everyday pains and hurts that people go through. I didn't never associate it with that. And so she introduced me to Andy, and I started working with churches, and I was already working in the housing authority there, teaching the principles. And then she came to us, Andy did, myself, and 4 or 5 other ladies that were like really volunteers. They're all, they're really volunteers. I'm probably the only one that gets paid out of the organization. And she said, she took us to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we went to a trauma, I guess it's a university, it's a week-long university kind of thing that Father Paul Abernathy does. So we went there. When we went there, we were seeing how these people were in the community, they were in housing authority, and they were doing things. We already were trying to teach people about trauma, but we didn't have the concept of how you put it into a package, to make it work in the community. So that's why we went to the training. When we went to the training, we had no name. We had not established Sarasota Strong. And then when we came back, we were like, hey, we got to do this, with what we're doing. Because I was already out there in the trenches doing the little, few things that I was doing as far as teaching. And so we came up with the name Sarasota Strong. Now we're going about 2 years with that name. And now we have a forum that we do where we bring in speakers and we talk about different topics that are like domestic violence. We've done trafficking, traumatic things for people. So we do that once a month. I do a letting go of a traumatic past workshop that we do once a month. I do one-on-ones with people. I do life coaching as well. I work with a group of youth now. I do some go in-house, and I do some seniors. I have a senior complex. I did housing authority, working with some kids in a church now. I've done training. So what we did, we just started sharing what trauma was to people. And my portion of it is the trauma healing part. So I stay in my lane. I do teach what trauma is, but I stay in the lane of getting people to see how they can heal themselves, by understanding what they're going through. And I've seen a lot in these last 2 years, people changing. I shared a couple of them with you, but that's kind of what we do. We're really more of an informational. We're not don't have a building. We all work from home. It's not like we have anything big, but it's really grown. We probably have 500 or to 5,000 followers,
Wow.
with what we've been doing. And we get with people all over the country. People have been in my workshops from Australia to Canada, England. I mean, all the states. I mean, we've had people. So we were trying to do Sarasota area, but because of Sarasota and people in Sarasota knowing other people, it's spread out. So we're really kind of international now. Mhm.
That's awesome. So may I put then Sarasota Strong in my
Mhm.
description so that people can find it?
Yes,
Okay.
sarasotastrong.org. It's
Okay.
srqstrong.org.
Okay. Now you also mentioned your workshop, Letting Go of the Traumatic Past. Is that
Mhm.
available to anyone, or is it just for
Yes.
people? Okay.
It's a free one that, like I said, we've had people all over. You go on our website site, you can register, and you'll register, and it'll ask you to email me for the link, but you have to go on there and register. And the reason that we have you register first is because we get money from the Sarasota Community Foundation,
Mhm.
so we need to at least keep some grant, kind of information in there, race, zip code, male or female, those kind of things. So those are the kind of questions that ask you to register. But that's so that we can continue to keep our workshops and everything free. Because whatever we do, we don't charge. Our forums are free, our workshops are free, life coaching is free, all that stuff is free. But in order to get grants for us to do that free, we need that information of registering on the website.
Very good. Okay, so we're in 2021 on the heel of, well, maybe still in, hopefully,
Yeah.
the end of the pandemic. All kinds of stuff going on in the world, socially, politically, and this is around the world, not only in the United States. So let me ask you, in terms of politics, are you hopeful or not hopeful?
I'm gonna always be hopeful. I have to be hopeful because what I've seen lately, because people are caught up in politics, and I'm seeing so many people suffering because they're so worried about what's going to happen in politics. So because I've been there for 38 years in that suffering mode, I can't go back. So I'm gonna have hope, even if it don't come through. I'm still gonna be pushing through that. We're gonna be hopefully everything's gonna be all right.
Okay. Second question. I think I know the answer, but I want to ask. 21st century, 2021, with all that we know, we've already kind of mentioned this, but people go through depression. Some people not only are contemplating suicide, some people today have already attempted suicide, and some people have successfully carried it out. In terms of people feeling better about their lives, are you hopeful or are you not hopeful?
I'm hopeful, but I'm also realistic and know that everybody hasn't had an experience as far as this understanding, and they're caught up in that. And I've been there where you are so down that you don't know, it's no way but up, but you don't see it. So I've been there, and I think God allowed me to be in that, because like I said, I've been in the mental hospital, in the mental health ward with depression and stuff. So I understand how at that point I didn't see any hope. So I want to say that I know, because of what I know, that there's hope, but I also be realistic and know that so many people don't know. And I have fear, and my heart aches for them, because I may not be able to get to them, or nobody else can get to them. But I do know that it's out there. But being realistic, I'm seeing it. I've known some people myself that have taken their lives, and that have been so depressed that they can't see no way up. Yeah.
Well, Helen, I tell you, this has been a treat to talk to you. Just so you'll know, I caught you on YouTube. I think it was a short video put out by the Center for Sustainable Change. Right. I was on my bicycle exercising that morning, and you came up, and I thought, whoa, I got to talk to her. And I just find you amazingly powerful and amazingly real. So I really am grateful. I'm grateful for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And one other thing I have out there, since you mentioned YouTube, I have a show that I just started this year. and it's called the Emotional Healing Corner, because I realized that, like you said, some people may never get to a workshop, but know people like Dave, like you knew, with sustainable change and that. So I kind of stuck it out. That's called the Emotional Healing Corner. And you could catch a couple of my shows on there. And I put that out there for the maybe somebody that's going through some emotional stuff and may just hear something, make
That's
them feel better.
fantastic. Well, look, I would like to talk with you again. How
Okay,
about-
sure.
have some things, and maybe if I'm so fortunate, maybe we can just do some work together.
That sounds like good. Yeah. I look through your stuff and I'm interested in us doing some networking. We can help more people. The more you know people I don't know, we can help a lot of people. So,
That's wonderful. Well, thank you once again, Helen. You're going to sign off in just a moment. Let me get queued up. You've been listening to the Possibility Action Network. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton. We've had as our guest, Helen Neal-Ali, the founder of Life Coaching Consultant Associates and the author of the book, Okay Forever. Thanks for joining us today. Until next time, good day